Hello, my name is Hasan Sorrells, and this is the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, Shorts. There's no co-host on these Shorts episodes. These are now around 6 to 8 minute long observations, ideas, thoughts, or rants about the literature, philosophy, psychology, and even the theology of leadership. Because listening to me talk about leadership for now around 6 to 8 minutes is still better than reading and trying to understand yet another business book. Even that business book that has been sitting in your Amazon queue that you just haven't been able to bring yourself to purchase for around the last 6 months. The victory of the laws may have been too complete. The franchise may have opened too broadly, and the results were, of course, unexpected. Long ago, when the government bureaucrats decided to dictate to private industry the nature of who they could associate with and sell to, the nature of interpersonal relations between the various ethnic people in the multi-ethnic United States became forcibly unified. No longer legally crowded into the ghettos, trapped on the reservations, or crowded into the inner cities, freedom of movement was now psychologically open, even though legally it had always been so. But with this new birth of psychological and legal freedom came a commensurate level of new responsibilities, including the need for competency, skills, and above all else, positive attitudes. None of that was hard, of course, for the first generation following on the heels of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, as many of the formerly barred minorities had been raised to compete with excellence against all odds against the majority, because the barriers to entry into that formerly closed world had seemed so legally, psychologically, culturally, and morally insurmountable. But as the generations went by and more of the barriers eroded, the gatekeepers were demoted or voted out, and the social and cultural penalties for dissenting became more and more draconian, the friction required to overcome the former barriers gradually disappeared. And while the average minority individual may have become more skilled, competent, and excellent, the minority group and the worst edges of the minority group became less competent, less excellent, and more driven by a spiritual and moral posture of nonconformity or disassociation with the majority overall. There is a weird psychological and spiritual parallel here to the expansion of economic materialism to lands once driven by native struggles. More prosperity equates to less spiritual struggle, which leads to more decadence, and finally to a loss of material wealth. The same is happening here. More access equates to less spiritual struggle, which leads to more decadence, and finally to a loss of access and acceptance from the majority. The victory of the laws is almost complete. There is rapidly approaching, probably within the next 10 years, if America can hold together as a political unity, a reckoning coming. But not the kind the current rabble-rousers in the culture think. Financial reparations, violent left-wing street activism, political maneuvering, and socio-cultural shaming are long past their sell-by date for effectiveness. They are expiring quickly as the majority becomes more and more a minority. And as the tales, stories, and myths of past offenses by the former majority and discriminations and hurts of the former majority to the now minority begin to read less and less like the conviction of a minority people toward a growing conscience in a dominant majority. Those tales, stories, and myths begin to read more and more like the condemnation of an overall cultural structure and seem to lead inevitably or call inevitably for its overall destruction. Well, at that point, the victory of the laws will be complete. And when that happens, weirdly enough, the words of a former reverend, now a secular American saint, will be finally, completely, and totally realized. Sprouting forth along the long and twisted American way, trapping the very people about whom he was speaking in their long tendrils, and forcing the descendants of his own people against their formidable resistance to become, at long last, just average Americans. And I quote, I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right down in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places shall be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. Close quote. And well, that's it for me. Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast today. And now that you've made it this far, you should subscribe to the audio version of this show on all the major podcast players, including Apple iTunes, Spotify, YouTube Music, and everywhere else where podcasts are available. There's also a video version of our podcast on our YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to the video version of this podcast on the Leadership Toolbox channel on YouTube. Just search for Leadership Toolbox and hit the subscribe button there on YouTube. And while you're doing that, leave a 5-star review if you like what we're doing here on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Just go below the player and hit 5 stars. We need those reviews to grow, and it's the easiest way to help grow this show. And tell all your friends, of course, in leadership. By the way, if you don't like what we're doing here, well, you can always listen to another leadership show. There are several other good ones out there. At least that's what I've heard. All right. Well, that's it for me.